Modern agriculture presents itself as a triumph of intelligence. Bigger machines, smarter chemicals, optimized seeds, data-driven decisions. From the outside, it looks like a solved equation. More yield per hectare, less labor per unit, more food for a growing planet. The narrative is clean, confident, and endlessly repeated. Efficiency became the religion. Straight lines in the field, perfect rows, tractors guided by satellites. Farming stopped looking like biology and started looking like engineering. And for a while, the results justified the belief. Yields increased, output scaled, food became cheaper relative to income. On paper, the system worked. But the lie was never about results. The lie was about cost. Not financial cost alone, the deeper cost, the one that doesn't show up in annual reports, equipment brochures, or yield maps. The cost pushed forward in time, diluted across decades, hidden inside soil structure, ecosystem resilience, and farmer dependency. Modern agriculture didn't eliminate scarcity. It postponed consequences. The system rewards immediate productivity, not long-term stability. It celebrates output while quietly ignoring what is being consumed to achieve it. Soil health is treated as an adjustable parameter. Biodiversity as a variable to be controlled. Risk as something technology will eventually solve. This mindset transformed farming into an industrial process. Inputs go in, outputs come out. If something breaks, add more inputs. More fertilizer, more correction, more technology. The assumption is that nature is a machine that just needs better calibration. But nature is not a machine. It is a system that remembers. Every intervention leaves a trace. Every shortcut accumulates interest. And when those costs compound slowly enough, they become invisible. Until they don't. The uncomfortable truth is that modern agriculture did exactly what it was designed to do. It maximized short-term efficiency under economic pressure. What it was never designed to do was protect the long-term integrity of the system it depends on. That omission is not accidental. It is structural, and once you see it, it becomes impossible to ignore. Soil is the quiet victim of modern agriculture. It is everywhere, it supports everything, and because it rarely fails all at once, it is easy to ignore. For decades, soil was treated not as a living system, but as a background condition. Something stable, something permanent, something that could be adjusted chemically if needed. The dominant assumption was simple. Soil exists to hold plants upright while nutrients are delivered externally. If yields dropped, the solution was not to ask what changed inside the soil, but what was missing from the fertilizer blend. Biology was inconvenient, chemistry was predictable. This approach worked because soil has memory and buffering capacity. Organic matter accumulated over centuries does not disappear in a single season. Structure degrades slowly. Microbial networks collapse quietly. You can extract value from soil for years before the bill arrives. Modern farming accelerated extraction. Intensive tillage broke aggregates and exposed organic matter to oxidation. Heavy machinery compacted layers that roots once explored freely. Monocropping simplified ecosystems that evolved to be diverse. None of these actions caused immediate collapse. That was the danger. Yield remained high, so the system declared success. But underneath the surface, resilience was leaking away. Water infiltration slowed, root depth decreased, nutrient cycling weakened. The soil still produced, but only because it was being forced to. This created a dangerous illusion that soil quality is optional as long as inputs are sufficient. In reality, inputs were compensating for damage, not enhancing performance. Each correction masked another loss of function. Once soil biology is degraded, recovery is slow and uncertain. You cannot replace structure with fertilizer. You cannot substitute microbial diversity with chemistry. And yet, the economic model of modern agriculture leaves little room for patience. Banks do not finance soil regeneration timelines. Supply chains do not reward invisible improvements underground. The system values yield this season, not resilience 10 years from now. So soil became a consumable asset, used intensely, corrected aggressively, and abandoned when costs exceeded returns. Expansion replaced restoration. New land was cheaper than rebuilding biology. This is not ignorance, it is incentive alignment, and once incentives push in this direction long enough, degradation becomes normalized. Not as a failure, but as the way farming works. The tragedy is that by the time soil problems become visible, options are already limited. What was once a living system becomes a dependency platform, requiring constant external support just to maintain baseline productivity. That is not efficiency, that is fragility. Fertilizer dependency and the illusion of control. Fertilizers were introduced as tools, not lifelines. Their original purpose was to supplement natural fertility, to correct specific deficiencies, to support growth when biological supply fell short. For a time, that distinction mattered. Then it disappeared. As soil biology weakened and natural nutrient cycling declined, fertilizers stopped being optional. They became structural. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium were no longer supporting the system. They were replacing it. This shift created the illusion of control. Nutrients could be measured, calculated, applied. Growth became something you could engineer. If yields were low, the solution was mathematical. Increase the dose, adjust the timing, optimize the blend, and it worked. Plants responded immediately. Leaves turned darker. Growth accelerated. Harvest numbers climbed. The feedback loop was fast and rewarding, which is exactly how dependency systems establish themselves. What was harder to see was what disappeared in the process. Microbial communities that once mobilized nutrients naturally were sidelined. Mycorrhizal networks weakened when roots no longer needed their assistance. Organic matter inputs declined because residues were removed and soil life was disrupted. The soil slowly lost its ability to feed plants on its own. At that point, fertilizer efficiency became the only metric that mattered. Not ecosystem efficiency, not energy efficiency, just yield per unit applied. But efficiency in a dependent system is misleading. Every unit of fertilizer now had to compensate not only for crop demand, but for the biological functions that were no longer present. The system became increasingly sensitive to price fluctuations, supply disruptions, and timing errors. When fertilizer prices rise, margins collapse. When logistics fail, yields suffer. When application is slightly off, the plant has no backup source. The buffer is gone. This is the paradox. The more controlled the system becomes, the more fragile it actually is. Modern agriculture markets this as precision. In reality, it is exposure. A system that cannot function without constant external inputs is not optimized. It is hostage to its supply chain. The illusion of control also extends to environmental consequences. Nutrients that are not absorbed do not disappear. They move into water systems, into the atmosphere, into places where they create costs that are not paid by the yield map. Those costs are externalized, just like soil degradation was, pushed away from the field, away from the balance sheet, away from the narrative of success. And as long as yields stay high, the system calls this acceptable. Until it isn't. Scale, machinery, and the cost of looking efficient. Mechanization was sold as liberation. Fewer hands, faster operations, more land covered in less time. On the surface, it delivered exactly that. Tractors grew larger, implements wider, harvest windows tighter. One operator could do the work of many. But scale quietly changed the economics of farming. Machines stopped being tools and became financial commitments. High upfront costs, long financing terms, proprietary software, specialized maintenance. Ownership no longer meant control. It meant dependency on manufacturers, dealers, and update cycles. The logic of scale forces constant expansion. To justify a larger machine, you need more hectares. To manage more hectares, you need more capital. To access more capital, you need predictable output. Predictable output requires standardized systems, reduced diversity, and minimal deviation. Flexibility disappears. A system optimized for scale cannot easily adapt. When weather shifts, when markets move, when inputs spike in price, the system has no slack. Every delay is expensive. Every failure is amplified. This is why many high-output operations feel constantly on edge. Gross production numbers look impressive, but net margins are thin. One bad season can erase multiple good ones. The machine does not care about climate variability or market volatility. Payments are due regardless. Technology promised risk reduction. In practice, it concentrated risk. The visual language of modern agriculture reinforces the illusion. Big machines signal power. Straight fields signal order. Data dashboards signal intelligence. But visual efficiency is not the same as systemic resilience. The farmer becomes an operator of a system they do not fully control. Decisions are constrained by equipment capacity, software settings, financing schedules, and contract obligations. Innovation becomes risky. Deviation becomes dangerous. Scale locks behavior in place. This is not a failure of farmers. It is the outcome of a system that rewards uniformity and punishes experimentation. When success is defined narrowly as output per hectare, everything else becomes a liability. And yet, despite all this technology, the system grows more anxious, not more secure. More productive, but less forgiving. More impressive, but more brittle. Efficiency, when pursued without resilience, becomes a trap. The farmer inside the system. Modern agriculture often talks about farmers as decision makers, entrepreneurs, managers of land and capital. In reality, many operate less like independent agents and more like operators inside a tightly constrained system. Debt is the quiet architect of those constraints. Land, machinery, inputs, infrastructure. Almost every component of large-scale farming is financed. Each loan comes with expectations. Predictable yields, stable practices, low deviation, risk avoidance. The system does not reward creativity. It rewards compliance. This shapes behavior long before planting decisions are made. A farmer who wants to experiment with lower inputs, alternative rotations, or regenerative practices is not just taking agronomic risk. They are taking financial risk. One underperforming season can trigger cascading problems. Missed payments, renegotiated loans, reduced credit access. So even when problems are recognized, action is delayed. Not because farmers are ignorant or stubborn, but because the system punishes early movers. Change is safest only after it becomes mainstream. By then, the damage is already widespread. Pressure also comes from supply chains. Grain buyers, processors, exporters. Uniformity simplifies logistics. Variability complicates contracts. Quality standards are narrow, deviate too much, and access disappears. This creates a feedback loop. The system demands consistency. Consistency requires simplification. Simplification increases dependency. Dependency increases vulnerability. Farmers feel this tension daily. They are told to innovate, to adopt new technology, to be sustainable. At the same time, they are locked into models that leave little room for experimentation. Sustainability becomes a slogan, not a strategy. Mental strain is part of this reality. Uncertainty is constant. Weather, prices, policy, inputs. The margin for error shrinks while expectations rise. Success is publicly celebrated. Failure is privately absorbed. From the outside, agriculture looks powerful. From the inside, it often feels fragile. This is the human cost of a system optimized for output above all else. A system that runs fast, tight, and unforgiving. And the tighter it runs, the harder it becomes to change direction. One of the most persistent myths in modern agriculture is that higher efficiency automatically leads to better financial outcomes. Produce more per hectare, reduce cost per unit, optimize operations. On spreadsheets, it looks inevitable. In reality, efficiency and profitability often drift apart. Yield increases are real, but they rarely scale in isolation. Each additional unit of production usually requires additional inputs. More fertilizer, more protection, more precision, more technology. The cost curve rises alongside the yield curve, sometimes faster. What gets lost is marginal return. The first improvements deliver strong gains. Later improvements deliver diminishing returns. Eventually, the system enters a zone where producing more adds very little profit, or none at all, while increasing exposure to risk. This is where many operations find themselves. High-performing on paper, vulnerable in practice. Markets do not reward individual efficiency. They reward aggregate supply. When productivity rises across an entire region, prices adjust downward. The farmer who invested heavily to gain an edge often finds that edge absorbed by the market itself. The result is a treadmill. Run faster, stay in place. Efficiency metrics also ignore volatility. A system tuned for maximum output under ideal conditions performs poorly under stress. Drought, excess rain, heat, input shortages. The tighter the system, the less tolerance it has for deviation. Biologically diverse systems buffer shocks. Highly optimized systems amplify them. This is why some lower-yield systems outperform financially over time. Not because they are inefficient, but because they are resilient. Lower fixed costs, fewer critical dependencies, more flexibility in bad years. But these advantages are invisible in short-term comparisons. They do not show up in yield contests or promotional case studies. They reveal themselves slowly, across cycles, not seasons. Modern agriculture measures what is easy to measure. Tons, hectares, input rates. It rarely measures what actually determines survival. Stability, recovery speed, risk exposure. Efficiency became a proxy for success because it was quantifiable. Profitability, in a volatile system, is harder to standardize. And so the system continues to chase output, even when output stops serving the people producing it. The quiet collapse of soil biology. Soil does not fail dramatically. It degrades politely, slowly, quietly, without alarms. Biological collapse in soil is rarely visible from the surface. Crops still emerge, fields still look green, yields may even remain stable for years. This is what makes the problem so dangerous. Healthy soil is not defined by chemistry alone. It is defined by interaction. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, arthropods. A dense, dynamic network responsible for nutrient cycling, aggregation, disease suppression, and water regulation. When this network is intact, the system is resilient. When it is disrupted, everything becomes harder. Modern practices chip away at this network. Repeated disturbance breaks fungal highways. Lack of organic inputs starves microbial populations. Chemical dependency simplifies interactions. Over time, diversity collapses. The soil becomes quieter, less active, less responsive. At that stage, crops rely almost entirely on soluble nutrients. Roots stop investing in relationships they no longer benefit from. The system loses redundancy. Any disruption hits harder. Water management suffers next. Without biological structure, infiltration slows and runoff increases. Soils swing between saturation and drought stress. Extreme weather events become more damaging, not because they are new, but because the buffering capacity is gone. Disease pressure often rises as well. Simplified biological systems are easier for pathogens to exploit. The response is predictable: more chemical protection, more cost, more dependency. Rebuilding biology is possible, but it is not fast. Years of damage cannot be reversed in a single season. This conflicts directly with economic models that demand immediate results. So most systems don't rebuild. They stabilize at a lower biological baseline and compensate chemically. The soil becomes a platform for input delivery, not a living engine. This is the silent trade-off at the heart of modern agriculture. Short-term reliability at the expense of long-term autonomy. And once that autonomy is lost, every season becomes a negotiation with external inputs. Who really profits? When modern agriculture is evaluated, success is often measured at the field level. Yield, efficiency, output, but the system is not designed to maximize returns at the farm level. It is designed to optimize value across the entire supply chain. And that distinction matters. Input suppliers operate on volume and consistency. Fertilizer companies, seed developers, machinery manufacturers, chemical producers. Their profits scale with adoption, not with farmer margins. A farmer under pressure is not a problem for these industries. It is a predictable customer. Each efficiency gain on the farm side becomes a stable demand signal upstream. More hectares planted uniformly, more standardized inputs, more reliance on proprietary systems. Risk is transferred downward, profit is consolidated upward. The same applies downstream. Processors and traders benefit from scale and uniformity. Large volumes reduce per unit handling costs. Predictable quality simplifies contracts. Price volatility is often hedged long before it reaches the farmer. Farmers sit in the middle. They absorb biological risk, market risk, and financial risk. Their compensation depends on variables they do not control. Weather, global supply, policy shifts, input pricing. This is not conspiracy. It is system design. Modern agriculture externalized risk while internalizing dependency. Farmers are essential, but replaceable. The system values output more than producers. This is why innovation often flows in one direction. Technologies that lock users into ecosystems spread quickly. Practices that reduce dependency spread slowly. The incentives are misaligned. Profitability in agriculture increasingly depends on leverage, scale, contracts, access, not necessarily on agronomic excellence. This discourages long-term stewardship in favor of short-term survival. And when systems reward survival over sustainability, behavior follows. What actually works, without the fairy tales? At this point, the conversation usually derails. Someone expects a miracle solution, a buzzword, a return to the past. That is not how this works. There is no single practice that fixes modern agriculture. There is no universal recipe. Anyone selling one is either naive or selling something. What does work shares a pattern, not a checklist. Resilient systems reduce dependency before they chase optimization. They accept slightly lower peak output in exchange for stability across bad years. They prioritize processes that regenerate function rather than compensate for loss. That often means fewer passes, not more. Less disturbance, more biological continuity, cover where possible, diversity where manageable. not as ideology, but as risk management. These systems are not input-free. That myth needs to die. They still use fertilizer, still use machinery, still use chemistry when necessary. The difference is proportionality. Inputs support the system instead of replacing it. The farmers who succeed with these approaches are not chasing aesthetics. They are chasing margin stability, lower fixed costs, fewer catastrophic seasons, faster recovery after stress. The transition is the hard part. Early years are messy, yields fluctuate, systems rebalance. This is why these practices spread slowly. The short-term penalty collides directly with financial reality. What works is not perfection. It is optionality, a system that gives the farmer choices under pressure. Choices to reduce inputs in high-cost years. Choices to absorb weather shocks. Choices to adapt instead of double down. Resilience looks boring in a good year. It only reveals its value when conditions turn hostile. That is why it is underrepresented in marketing. You cannot sell, "nothing went wrong," as easily as record yields. But over time, these systems compound differently. Not in peak performance, but in survivability. And survivability is the metric that actually matters. The next decade, adaptation or fracture. The next decade of agriculture will not be defined by innovation alone. It will be defined by constraint. Climate volatility will increase. Input markets will remain unstable. Energy costs will fluctuate. Regulatory pressure will rise. None of this is speculative. It is already happening. Systems built for maximum efficiency under stable conditions struggle under variability. The tighter they run, the harder they fail. Modern agriculture is extremely good at producing food when everything works. It is far less good at absorbing disruption. This is the fault line. Farms that rely on narrow margins and rigid systems will feel pressure first. Not as collapse, but as constant stress. More years where everything has to go right just to break even. More reliance on external support. Less room to adapt. At the same time, expectations will increase. Produce more. Use less. Be sustainable. Be profitable. Be resilient. These demands are not compatible under the current model. Something has to give. Adaptation will not look dramatic. It will look uneven, regional, fragmented. Some operations will scale further and integrate vertically, absorbing risk through size. Others will de-risk by simplifying systems, reducing dependency, and prioritizing survival over expansion. What will break is the illusion that one model fits all. The lie at the center of modern agriculture was never malicious. It was convenient, the belief that technology alone could replace biology. That efficiency could substitute resilience. That future costs could be ignored indefinitely. That bill is coming due. The question is not whether modern agriculture will change. It already is. The question is who controls that change, and who is forced to react too late. In the end, the most valuable asset in agriculture will not be yield, scale, or technology. It will be adaptability, because systems that cannot bend eventually snap, and food systems do not get a second chance. Why the system resists change? If the problems are visible, the question becomes unavoidable. Why does change move so slowly? The answer is not ignorance. It is inertia. Modern agriculture is not just a set of practices. It is an ecosystem of contracts, debt structures, supply chains, insurance models, policies, and expectations. Each layer reinforces the next. Changing one variable forces friction across all others. A farmer who wants to reduce inputs challenges financing assumptions. A lender who accepts that risk challenges standardized risk models. An insurer who adapts challenges actuarial frameworks. The system is optimized for repetition, not experimentation. Innovation is welcomed only when it fits existing structures. New machinery that increases scale is acceptable. New chemicals that slot into current programs are acceptable. Practices that reduce dependency are disruptive. This creates a selection bias. Technologies that deepen reliance spread faster than those that restore autonomy. The result is a system that appears dynamic but is structurally conservative. It evolves horizontally, not fundamentally. Change does not fail because it is wrong. It fails because it threatens predictability. Agricultural policy often claims to support sustainability, resilience, and long-term stewardship. In practice, it rewards volume, uniformity, and short-term output. Subsidies are tied to production. Insurance favors standardized systems. Compliance frameworks are built around measurable inputs, not ecological outcomes. This creates a contradiction between stated goals and actual incentives. Regenerative outcomes are difficult to quantify quickly. Soil carbon takes time. Biodiversity recovery is uneven. Risk reduction shows up only during stress events. Policies prefer certainty, even when that certainty hides long-term damage. As a result, policy reinforces the existing model while rhetorically criticizing it. Farmers are asked to change, but paid to stay the same. This gap between intention and implementation locks the system in place. The illusion of technological salvation. There is a growing belief that technology will resolve these tensions. AI-driven farming, precision everything, automation layered on automation. Technology can improve decision-making. It cannot replace system design. A fragile system with better sensors is still fragile. A dependent system with better analytics is still dependent. Most technological solutions optimize existing pathways. They do not question whether those pathways should exist. They reduce variance without restoring resilience. This is not failure. It is misapplication. Technology amplifies intent. If the intent is extraction, technology accelerates extraction. If the intent is regeneration, technology can support it. The difference lies upstream. Without structural change, technology becomes a way to delay reckoning, not prevent it. One future is not coming. Many are. Regions with stable climates, strong infrastructure, and access to capital will double down on industrial efficiency. Vertical integration will increase. Farms will resemble logistics nodes more than ecosystems. Other regions will fragment. Smaller operations will adapt locally. Mixed systems will emerge. Risk will be managed biologically rather than financially. This divergence will be framed as progress versus backwardness. In reality, it will be adaptation versus rigidity. Uniformity will no longer be the dominant survival strategy. Context will matter again, and systems that ignore context will struggle. In the next phase of agriculture, success will quietly be redefined. Not by maximum yield, not by hectares managed, not by technological sophistication, but by survival without collapse. The operations that endure will not be the most optimized, but the least brittle. The least exposed, the most capable of absorbing shock without external rescue. This will not be celebrated. It will not trend on social media. It will not look impressive in good years. But it will last. Modern agriculture does not need to be abandoned. It needs to be rebalanced. Biology restored to equal footing with chemistry. Flexibility valued alongside efficiency. Long-term function treated as a real asset. The lie was never that modern agriculture produces food. The lie was that it could do so forever without changing itself.